Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Wonderful to see you here. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Marie McCabe and I'm the CEO of Dementia Australia. It's an honour to welcome you all to our launch event for Dementia Action Week. And the title of this event is Discrimination and Dementia, the health issue of our time. Ladies and gentlemen, I acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we're meeting today and pay my respects to their elders past and present and to any elders that are here today. We are filming, live streaming and taking photographs for today for promotional purposes. Now, if there's anybody in the room that does not wish to be photographed, please let Sarah know. Sarah, would you just put your hand up so people can see you? So if you are meant to be somewhere else and you have snuck in, she's the woman that will protect your identity today. Ladies and gentlemen, I am delighted to welcome Ita Buttrose, AC OBE, Chair of the ABC and Dementia Australia Ambassador and former President of Alzheimer's Australia. Welcome to Maggie Beer, AM, Australian food icon. Welcome to Shayna Blaze, interior designer and television presenter. To David Spears, political editor of Sky News. To Phil Hazel, chair of our Dementia Australia Advisory Committee. To Jay Dave, dementia advocate, and to John Fink of the Fink Group, and John is also a filmmaker. We will hear more from these people later on today during the program. I also welcome Sue Peters-Hawke, Dementia Australia Ambassador, and I'd like to acknowledge and welcome the Honourable Leslie Williams, MP, Deputy Speaker and Member for Port Macquarie. As a co-convener for our Parliamentary Friends of Dementia, Leslie is a long-time supporter and champion of our Dementia Friends program. I'd also like to welcome and acknowledge Kate Swaffer, CEO and Founding Director of Dementia Alliance International, and Kate was also the inaugural chair of the Dementia Australia Advisory Committee. To our extraordinary dementia advocates, too many of which are to name, I welcome you here today, and our Dementia Action Week campaign is only possible because of you. Today, ladies and gentlemen, you'll hear from Phil, from Jay, and from others later in the program, and they're here to play a role in our campaign, and many who we've consulted in the development, I also thank and acknowledge. We cannot do what we do without them. I also acknowledge Jo Mond, Assistant Secretary, Dementia and Supported Ageing, Department of Health, to Dr. Belinda Goodenough, Executive Director, Dementia Training Australia, to Sel Navarra and Mari Florio, major donors and long-time supporters, welcome. I have some apologies from Professor Graham Samuel, AC, Chair of the Dementia Australia Board, and our local ambassadors Natasha Belling from Network 10, Stephanie Ben-Dixon, television presenter, Samantha Pullman from the Giants Netball, the Honourable John Watkins, AM, and Doris Unane, actor, most recently known for Network 10's 5 Bedrooms. All unfortunately are unable to be here today. They've sent their apologies and they've sent their best wishes for a fabulous event. Welcome to our live stream audience. So today, wherever you are in Australia, welcome. The theme of this year's Dementia Action Week is Dementia Doesn't Discriminate, Do You? And during this week, we're starting a conversation with all Australians to consider how discrimination impacts people living with dementia, their families and their carers. We're reinforcing that anyone can develop dementia. Dementia doesn't discriminate, and whilst we can change how we respond and behave around people living with dementia, that is the aim of this week, is to shine a light on discrimination and to elevate the profile of dementia such that people are included, that discrimination and stigma are not issues for people living with dementia and those impacted by it. Ladies and gentlemen, you may be aware that currently there are 447,000 Australians living with dementia. Dementia is the leading cause of death in Australia for women. It's the second leading cause of death overall. And we know that without a medical breakthrough, the number of people living with dementia is expected to rise by 2058 to around 1.1 million people. Dementia could impact your partner, your parents, your friends, your work colleagues, or you. In fact, 1 in 3 of us in this room will at some time during our lives develop dementia. So it's essential that we start this conversation and improve the way we relate to people living with dementia, their families, and their carers. Discrimination can take many forms. A person living with dementia might be ignored or dismissed in conversations. Assumptions might be made about a person's capacity to contribute to conversations, to decision-making, whether or not they can still participate in activities of things that we would take for granted, or even continue to work. The overarching aim of our campaign this week is to encourage all Australians, our families, our friends, our work colleagues, through to government and researchers, to think and behave differently and bring about a societal shift in thinking about dementia. It is important for people to understand that with the right support, information and services, this can make a life-changing difference to people living with dementia. If you haven't done so already, I urge you to complete a short online survey on our website, and that survey is designed to inform us, to give us a national picture and to understand how discrimination for people living with dementia occurs, in what context it occurs, and what it would take for us to end discrimination. The survey closes at the end of September, and the results will be used to inform and fulfil on our commitment to create a movement of change that will tackle discrimination. I encourage you to share this event today on social media. Please use the hashtag Dementia Doesn't Discriminate in all of your posts. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, I would now like to invite Uncle Ray Davison to welcome us all to country. Please join me in welcoming Uncle Ray.
Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. It's lovely to be here this morning. My name's Uncle Ray Davison. Excuse me. I'm here today on behalf of the Metropolitan Local Aboriginal Lands Council. The Lands Council and its members being the custodians to the clan groups of the Eora Nation. Once again, give me permission to come along and welcome people to country. I'm also here on behalf of my people, the Gadigal people, once again to welcome each and every one of you to country. It's really lovely that I get the opportunity to come along at any given time to any forums or meetings or gatherings, and it's really lovely that being on my traditional land that I have these wonderful opportunities. So I love expressing it each and every time I do have that opportunity. Now, I love saying to people when I'm giving Welcome to Country that I don't have a set speech or a set talk. I do what I call having a yarn, and within that yarn I deliver the protocols of Welcome to Country, and it'll be no different today. So being on my traditional land, it's truly fantastic, and I can't help it as well. I get a bit cheeky about telling people that this is the most beautiful traditional land in the most beautiful city in the most beautiful country in the world. And I mean that from the heart, because when I give Welcome to Country, or Welcome to Country is given, it encompasses all Australians. So you all know that Welcome to Country has its origins right here on the east coast of Australia, and it goes back many, many thousands of years, and we've always had Welcome to Country when we have big celebrations and big corroboree, and we celebrate by song and dance. It's done today, as I'm doing it orally. It's not as significant, it holds the same importance. So today is a gathering. This is a corroboree, so we're here today continuing on that tradition that's been going on for thousands of years, because Welcome to Country doesn't see Aboriginal or non-Aboriginal or our ethnicity, it just sees us as Australians. So regardless of whether we've been here for 10,000 years or 1 year or a new child born today, if you're born on country, then naturally you're part of country and you belong to country. And I love expressing, or each time I give Welcome to Country, I should say, I always take the opportunity to remind us, and I do this each and every time, that we have one mother, and that's Mother Earth, and Mother Earth knows each and every one of us, and she loves us all equally. It doesn't matter who we are, where we come from, we're all part of the same, and we're all loved the same. But just for me personally, being on my traditional land, it's really spectacular that I get the opportunity each and every time to come along to such a function and give welcome to country. Coming here this morning, now I worked in health. I'm going to tell you my life story, but I left school at 15, had a bit of a journey through the years, and finished up going back to school in my 30s, getting an education, working in health for 27 years. So I'm quite aware of what people are dealing with dementia. So to be here today for that is quite good for me, because we know that's the most invasive medical condition that people can have. It just steals your soul from you. So once again, to each and every one of you, welcome. I love telling people, when I give welcome to country, it's not always just from, oh, I've got to mind myself, 5 minutes. Always, don't go past 5 minutes. Old people tend to do this, we start rambling on. But, and I say, laughingly, I say a lot of times when I'm giving welcome to country, when I leave home and my wife says goodbye at the door, she's been doing it for 60 years now. She says, just do welcome today and don't do this. And I tell people I can't do that. I find that impossible, because my connection to you is telling you that we all belong to country. So in doing that, sometimes I like using analogies. And my favourite analogy is, you may come from a town that has some quaint little church and some beautiful river system, some wonderful mountain range. So when you're away from country, that's what you think of, and family and friends. Or you may come from a big city, such as Sydney, and once again, your best memories are your high school years and your family and friends. So when you're away from country, those are the things you think of, and family. Now just remember, each and every time you come and go from country, it's not just your direct ancestors who were there greeting you and farewelling you each and every time, but it's the people that have been on that land for thousands of years. They know you as well, and they greet you and farewell you each and every time you come and go from country. So just in closing, as I was going to say a moment ago, it's not always just from a traditional perspective that I love giving welcome to country. I was born at La Perouse, where the Europeans first touched the east coast of Australia. My clan land runs from down here, Tellawalda, through to Redfern and beyond. So my people, the Gadigal people, have had the longest continuous unbroken association with Europeans since the settlement of Australia. And it's really wonderful and unique, once again, that I get an opportunity to come along here today. Now, as I was saying, it's not always just from that traditional perspective. Now, as a young bloke, way back in 1969, I had the fortune of working down the bowels of the Opera House as a young scaffolder. So once again, no matter where I go on my traditional land, I have this personal connection with it, the same as each and every one of us here today. So once again, to each and every one of you, welcome to my country, welcome to your country, welcome to our country. Just in keeping with Aboriginal custom and protocol, pay respects to elders and descendants, both past and present, of my people, the people of the Eora, and thank them for the caring of the waterways and the land for the thousands of years, once again, of which we all benefit from today, and extend that welcome and gratitude to each and every one of you, and pay respects to your elders and descendants, both past and present as well, for without those people, none of us would be here today. So once again, to each and every one of you, welcome. May the spirits of my ancestors, well, I don't say these words lightly, we believe within our culture at any given time there are thousands of our ancestors around us, and we all have the same similar culture. May the spirits of my ancestors walk beside you and protect you whilst you're on Gadigal land, Eora country. As I know, they walk beside and protect me. Thank you all very much, and please excuse me for walking off now, because the council's got me somewhere else. So thank you all very much, and I hope today's really, really productive. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ray. So, ladies and gentlemen, we're now going to move to our panel discussion to flesh out the topic of discrimination and dementia with the support of an extraordinary group of people. Please join me in welcoming our panel facilitator for today, David Spears. David is political editor at Sky News. Since joining Sky News in 2000, please come up, David. David has anchored dozens of state and federal election night broadcasts and leaders' debates. In 2020, he'll move to the ABC as host of ABC Insiders. I'd now like to welcome our panel members. Ita Buttrose, AC, OBE. Ita has a long association with Dementia Australia, starting as a member of the New South Wales Advisory Committee and later as National President of Alzheimer's Australia from 2011 to 2014. Ita's a passionate dementia advocate and has contributed in countless ways as an ambassador for Dementia Australia. In February 2019, Ita was named chair of our ABC. Maggie Beer, AM. Maggie is an Australian food icon. She's judge on Foxtel's The Great Australian Bake Off. Maggie's career spans farming, television, presenting and food writing. Since 2014, through the Maggie Beer Foundation, Maggie has been a passionate advocate for a good food life for all, regardless of age and health restrictions, and has done some extraordinary work in aged care in ensuring that all residents have food that is nutritious and delicious. Shayna Blaze is an award-winning interior designer, known for her role as a judge on the 9 networks The Block and as host of Selling Houses Australia on Foxtel. Shayna has created stunning interiors in residential homes and commercial spaces for more than 20 years. Phil Hazel is a Dementia Australia advocate and chair of Dementia Australia Advisory Committee. Phil is a busy and enthusiastic advocate for Dementia Australia, and his role as chair, he's spoken at numerous forums and events and is actively representing people living with dementia in media interviews, film projects, focus groups, program development and research projects. Phil's joined on stage by his assistant's dog, Sarah. Ladies and gentlemen, during this session, some of our panel will share their personal experiences of dementia, and together we'll explore the impact of discrimination in relation to dementia. Please join me in welcoming our panel. I'll now hand over to David to facilitate the panel discussion.
Well, Marie, thank you very much for the introduction there. I'm delighted to be here today with a terrific panel, I should say. This is wonderful to have this group of people on stage. Sarah as well, of course. You've heard who they are. We're going to tease out in a moment why they're here, what their connections are to this issue. Look, Marie laid out the statistics here. You know, we all know the reality that most of us are going to have an experience with dementia. It's going to impact our lives at some point. What we're focused on, as Marie explained in this session today, is discrimination. And I want to explore what is discrimination, what impact it has, and then importantly get to some of the solutions here as well. But perhaps if you can all just make a very brief opening remark as to why you're here, your connection to this issue. Ida, to you first.
Well, my father had vascular dementia, which is the second most common dementia after Alzheimer's disease, which accounts for about 70% of all the cases here. So I have a very good understanding of what it's like to watch someone you love fight dementia, and I know what it's like to be a carer, and I know something of the isolation that people with dementia experience.
And then, of course, your work with Dementia Australia over many years as well, which everyone in this room,
Yes.
I'm sure, would know. Maggie, what about you?
Well, for me, it's not so much a personal story with dementia in my family, but seeing the impact, believing in the impact of food on all of us, but no more than those that are living with dementia and what it can do for our lives. And working with Professor Ralph Martins when I put the book together, which was Recipes for Life, Food to Protect Our Brain from Dementia. So I took Ralph's science and put it into beautiful food, and I learned so much more about how a diet like the Mediterranean diet, in all its glory, can actually slow down cognitive decline. And that's a really important thing, to know that diet and exercise and mental stimulation and connectedness can make such a difference. And I don't think there is an awareness about that.
No, there's not. And I want to explore that a little more.
Yeah.
Shayna, what about you?
I come from both a personal and professional perspective of Alzheimer's and dementia. My mum was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and we lived with that for 16 years, and she was in high care very early, and stubborn as she was, she wouldn't go. So 16 years is a long time.
So 16 years she was...
She was
high
diagnosed for
care the whole
16
time?
years and high care for 14 years,
14,
which is quite unusual. So as a daughter, and with my kids, her only grandchildren that she remembered, we saw a whole different world of when you go into an institution, and that's what it is, and seeing your mother decline, but also the relationships decline around that. And then about 4 years ago, I was approached to be part of a dementia village. Now, it's not exclusively dementia, so I was part of all the design of, the barbershop, the hairdresser, the day spa, the cafe, the landscaping and the interiors. And as a professional, seeing how you can change lives, and I know I do that on a happiness level with just day-to-day life, but doing it from a medical perspective, and not just everything that a lot of the institutions is all about slip factor, and let's just be real about can you see wee and poo when you're putting fabrics down, but we went to the next level. So it was about creating environments with dignity and creating environments where family want to come, and that's one of the biggest thing of being a child of someone living with Alzheimer's dementia, is seeing the environment they're living in and you feel so uncomfortable. But also my children, with mum being in high care for so long, my children losing out on that time with their grandmother that they'll never get back because it was terrifying.
Well, that is a big area of discrimination that I want to get into as well when we talk about design features here as well. But Phil, to you finally, just give us a sense of your story.
I come across discrimination on a regular basis. Well, I should say Sarah and I come across. You might be fascinated to know where discrimination can come from, because sometimes it's the most unlikely places, whether it be a medical practitioner, whether it be a taxi driver. So when I was diagnosed 5 years ago, and Jan, my wife, and I went to see the specialist for the diagnosis, he said, go and get your affairs in order. Now, I was only 50. And I couldn't believe he just wiped us like that. He didn't say, here's a referral to see Dementia Australia. I can't do any more for you. That's it. Just dropped like a hot potato.
Amazing.
Wow.
And then
How did you take that?
I didn't know how to take it. I didn't know much about dementia, and I thought, I'm going to be dead in 3 months. That's why he said, go and get your affairs in order. We didn't know any better than that. And then another practitioner said to me, I was in hospital overnight, and the neurology team came in the morning and said, Phil, I think you need to go into full-time care or have a full-time carer because you had a fall on the stairs. And again, I looked at him and said, no way in the world. And we walked out in a bit of a huff, and I said, well, I'm not paying your invoice, I don't care what you say. Because I didn't get any value out of it.
Yeah. Well, this is going to be an interesting perspective to discrimination in the medical field. But perhaps I've got a video here we're going to start. We've got a few clips we're going to play. But this one, we're going to hear from some of the Dementia Australia advocates talking about discrimination. Then we can explore what is and what isn't discrimination. Let's have a look at this.
Each week, Dad would go to his local men's shed where they'd encourage him to use the equipment to his ability and to be generally social. He mainly swept the floors and kept things tidy and have general chit-chat with people. And then one day another member asked him why he bothered coming, because this person believed that Dad didn't do anything when he was there. It really took the wind out of his sails.
My GP, for example, many years ago in Bishina, I found him very patronising and unfortunately not very educated in dementia at that time. He was quite discriminating towards my mum because she was not English speaking, and I was interpreting between him and her, and never did he actually look at her or address her. It was just like she was nobody because she didn't speak English. So he misdiagnosed her dementia for about 4 years. He said she was getting worse with her depression. He said she was attention seeker and so on. You cannot imagine how hard those years were on my mom because she wasn't taken seriously with her illness, and on myself as a carer and the whole family. So even GPs need to understand this better.
When we complained about the quality and the presentation of food, the food services manager came along to a meeting with us and said, why does it matter? They are old and they have dementia. We now have a new in-house service which produces lovely, tasty meals.
I was trying to cross a road and I got disorientated as to exactly where I was and what was going on. And there was this, I couldn't even get to across the road, and there was this man who was standing there, and I asked him if he could help me across the road because I was trying to meet my niece. And he turned around and he said, "What the effing hell are you doing here?" And it was the most horrible, frightening situation. It was just like what I felt like in that instant was, oh my God, this is what it's like to have dementia. That was it.
All right, and look, apologies for the sync issues there, but you can clearly see what each is saying, and thank you to all who took part in the videos for that. I think there we heard from Tara McDonald, Daniela Helish, Jodi Freeman as well, and I think that might have been Anne Fairhill too in there. Look, this kind of echoes some of the points first made there, but Ita, to you first. I mean, is it clear what is and isn't discrimination in what we're listening to there? The stories about food service, the stories about the GP's ignorance, I suppose.
Ignorance, yeah, it is ignorance, isn't it? But it's simply not recognising that the person with dementia is a person. It's simply writing them right off. And you can have a diagnosis of dementia and be perfectly capable of living in the community for a number of years, and do whatever you want to do. Maybe not what you always did. So, I always think it's important. If you had dementia, how would you wish to be treated? And everything, if you answer that question honestly, then you know exactly. So when the doctor said to Phil, go home and make your will, he didn't really think about where you were at with your diagnosis. He just wrote you off. When people said no point feeding them, they don't understand what they're eating, it's ignorant. It's total, utter ignorance.
And the GP, let's just talk about this. So the GP is obviously the first port of call often when we're looking at a diagnosis. This is a common problem that the GP doesn't really know what to do.
Well, I know Marie would say that we've done a lot of work trying to educate GPs, but they would argue that they're very busy, they can't read everything that comes across their desk. And so
look, in fairness, they can't be expert on everything.
No, so you have another whack at them again. You sort of think, right, what will we do now? We'll mount another campaign. But they too would know within their own fraternity people who have a diagnosis of dementia.
Well, Phil, it goes to your experience you talked about earlier. I mean, it is alarming that a GP doesn't have the basics of what should happen at that point.
It's not having the basics. They don't want to see you. When I moved from Huntleys Cove to Northmead in Sydney, I had to find another GP. I phoned 3 and the receptionist said, I'll go and speak to doctor. And they came back and said, sorry, we're not taking in new patients. And this happened at 3 different practices until I found a GP that would actually see me. And I think it was because of the time reward is not very good, speaking to someone that has dementia, because I might take up a little extra time.
I hope you dobbed them in.
I thought there'd be...
You shouldn't take that lightly. Dob them in.
What should you do at that point? When
I'd ring the AMA.
Yeah.
I'd certainly ring the AMA and I'd complain, and I'd ask Dementia Australia to send the doctor information about what you should have been told. I mean, it's good advice, make a will. Yes, of course, get your affairs in order. That's good advice. But you weren't going to drop dead tomorrow.
No.
So he was a bit abrupt and a bit rude and thoughtless. He should have said, there's lots of advice, there's lots of things you can do, like change your diet, go for a walk every day, be physical, be mentally active. Even if you've got a diagnosis, that information is still good information. Yeah. But he didn't tell you any of those things, so he really let you down. I'd dob him in too.
Yeah. I think you're right.
The only way you can lift the standards, you have to complain about what is unsatisfactory.
Yeah.
And it's not just complaining about that, it's what happens to a person living with dementia when a doctor just says, I can't do anything more for you. Because with dementia, if you start to get stressed or anything like that, your memory goes, you feel totally isolated, you don't know where you are, and it takes all that time to get through all those feelings. Fortunately, I have Sarah, which helps me a great deal. But to walk out of a doctor's surgery and have to feel like that, what is going on?
And, Maggie.
But don't we have to go back to a more basic level, and the fact that the medical doctors have, I believe, 4 hours in nutrition in the whole of their course.
4
hours in nutrition, and the knowledge that they could have about food and how that can help, but also that how to help people living with dementia is a social responsibility that they should have a lot more knowledge about not having, as a norm.
And Maggie, can I get your thoughts on the other comment in the video there about food service? How often is this an issue where, I mean, it sounds appalling, this approach of, well, they have dementia, they're not, it doesn't matter, the presentation and the quality of the food.
Sadly, I have heard it. I have heard it many times. And the worst thing about that is everyone deserves pleasure and happiness. And the memories, the smells of beautiful food can give that happiness. And what does it matter whether someone remembers why but has that feeling of happiness? It is essential to living. And for them to say it doesn't matter is to take every strip of dignity away from the person in the life.
Well, I think the Aged Care Commission tells us that, the Royal Commission tells us that many older people, not just people with dementia, have to endure lousy food. And, the whole industry needs to lift the food standard.
It certainly
Is there
does.
a structural thing, though, in some facilities where they may have a separate wing for dementia? Is there a noticeable difference in the food service?
There is, sadly, but what we need is education again, because we need food that's finger food for dementia residents, so that they can have their dignity if they've forgotten how to use a knife and fork, and they can pick things up, and we need the smells. I come back to the scent of food. It is so important. The most evocative way that smells bring us back to good times in childhood, but the terrible thing about them being locked away.
Well, I mean, if you served up chocolate pudding, probably someone with dementia would think that was just wonderful, because as we know, a lot of the things from the very past is often the things that they do remember, like songs like songs they used to sing.
But then there's another issue with that, is because as all our palates age, we lose the ability for our taste receptors decline. So what we need is food that's much more powerful in flavour, and that's not being done nearly enough. And so what happens is that the sweetness is really important from the chocolate pudding, but that's a discretionary food that can negate the need for the good nutrition and for the protein and the dairy. So we need the good memories, but we also need the good food as well.
It also comes down to, the way the system is at the moment, is that they're allocated, sometimes 50 cents a meal or $2 a meal. Like, it's absolutely appalling.
50 cents.
There's some that I've heard absolutely horrendous stories, and the village that I was designing and working in, the residents actually were making their meals, and they had a vegetable garden that they could actually cook all their food from as well. And, there are people that also have other afflictions, like my mum, when she was diagnosed with diabetes at the same time. And so she said, you can tell people about the Alzheimer's, but don't you dare tell anyone about the diabetes. Because she was more worried about that one, because she didn't really understand the full extent of what Alzheimer's was. But it's that type of health that we need, and where you come from with what you're providing is the education of nutrition, how it actually can stop things progressing, how it can reverse. And, I've had a number of health issues myself and with family, and I knew sugar was a big, bad thing in my family, and I stopped sugar in my age from 20 because I was having children and I wanted sugar out of our life. And so I've always been educating myself and my children and all that sort of thing. And it's just interesting, once we get to a certain level of hospitalisation, things become bland, they become grey in colour, and they're loaded with sugar because it's some sort of sensory taste.
No onions, no curry, no spice,
Absolutely.
no nothing. My aunt and uncle, who were in separate aged care facilities, of course, in Australia, we separate old people at the end of their lives. Their food was always bland. They used to say to me, could you bring us a curry? Could you bring us something with onions?
Maggie, you're saying it should be the opposite.
Well, it should be absolutely the opposite, but you see, this education is not there. If you talk about food in aged care, there is not one organisation that gives an accredited course in aged care food that is absolutely essential, and it's very specialised. A cook in aged care should be the most talented cook, not the end of the line cook where industry sees them. And so that's why it's so important to give them the kudos.
Yeah. There are many areas of discrimination. This is the structural discrimination, I suppose, isn't it? Some other forms of structural discrimination. I mean, Phil, I read that getting travel insurance or health insurance can be difficult as well. Is that a form of structural discrimination?
I think it is. And Jan and I were going to go on a cruise until we found out that I couldn't get insurance. I could take the dog on a cruise, but I couldn't get personal health insurance for when I was travelling.
And that's just a standard because you have dementia.
Exactly, you're
out.
wiped again.
Wow.
That's it, end of story. So that's really upsetting.
So how does that, I mean, we're going to get to solutions here, but this would seem to be, at an industry level for the insurance sector or perhaps even for the government to do something about.
We've certainly had a lot of discussions with the insurance industry. I'm not sure where they've got to at the moment.
Anyway,
we have had discussions about all forms of insurance with the insurance industry, and they listen.
I want to play another a bit of video here. We're going to talk a bit about the impacts more particularly here. And Shona, I'm keen to hear from you too on design issues. Let's hear some more from some of the dementia advocates.
Travel insurance has always been a subject that I worried about, because if I wanted to travel overseas, for instance, I'd be battling to get insurance from anybody if I acknowledge the diagnosis that I have with younger onset dementia. And it has been many years that we've all tried the system to get it to change, and it's only just recently that someone has come forward and offered insurance for people with dementia. And that lightens the load for a lot of us, because there would be people who just wouldn't go away, wouldn't go overseas to see their rallies or whatever, because it was too risky. So thumbs up to those people now who have instigated that and supply on behalf of people with dementia. Great effort.
Sometimes Mum needed more support than previously, but I'd talk first directly with her about it and then network with others, and we'd provide that respectfully. So she continued to be engaged and active locally and in the broader community for years. And I learned that the best way to support that was to step back, communicate with her and support the life she wanted to live. That's her right as a human being. And if I overstepped the mark, she'd put me back in my place with a firm but fond, cut it out, bossy boots, which became code between us.
I was with Lee in Malvern Central, and I had to go to the toilet, and I finished going to the toilet, and I couldn't get out of the toilet. I couldn't actually get out of the toilet, and I was asking all these women, and it were only women, obviously, and they were just ignoring me. They were actually ignoring me as if I wasn't there, as if they were frightened of me. That was definitely the situation. There was either that, or they thought maybe I was trying to, take clothes or do something, but it was just they could, and it really. It was so strange, because it was all women in the same situation, in the same place, and they were just ignoring me. They were completely ignoring me and looking away from me. It was very, very scary, and I didn't know what was going to happen. And eventually, Lee, my partner, he just got up and he picked me up and took me out of there, because I was stuck, and it was terrible. It was absolutely terrible. God, I must be honest, even to this day, I'm very, very careful when I'm going into the toilets.
Yeah, that's Jodi Freeman. We also heard Sue Peters-Hawke, of course, and before her, Ian Gladstone, and thank you to all of them. Jodi's story there about becoming stuck in the toilet, it's a terrifying story. I mean, Shana, does this come down to, what does this come down to? And is that a common experience, do you think? Is this a design-related issue?
Look, it's a bit of both. It's one of those things that we tried to make the place not look like it was a hospital and try and make the spaces familiar. And just, you've got to get to the practicality of making sure that there's things that people can grab onto. But sometimes, like she was talking about, she's stuck, is that the cognitive means that she can't remember to push up. And that happened with my mum a lot. And I'll tell you a funny story on that one, is that my auntie was always not believing that she had dementia. We're going to go for a walk and we're going to do this. And they sat down in the park and everything was amazing, because my mum lost her cognitive before she lost any memory of anybody. But she couldn't actually get up off the ground. And so my auntie was trying to teach her to roll and push herself up. So for half an hour, she's rolling on the hills with my mum, and they're both laughing their heads off because my mum can't even remember why she's rolling too. And she can't remember to push because it's about distribution of weight. So it comes down to providing those elements that people can utilise, but there's different types of dementia that they forget that to grab a rail, they don't know what the rail's for. And it doesn't matter about where you are in your age and where you are in dementia. Excuse me, there's all different levels of types about Alzheimer's and dementia. And so when you're designing, it's really hard.
It needs to be specific.
Well, you do, but at the same time, you can't sort of really discriminate between the people that don't have that far. You know, you can't make a home.
This is difficult, I suppose. It can't be one size fits all, is
Absolutely.
what you're saying.
No, never one size fits all. And of course, your aunt wasn't strong enough to give your mother her hand and pull her up.
Yeah, well, my mum also
became
became a dead weight.
Yeah.
So my mum would pull down. And so there's all different ways to do that. And
is advice readily available on design issues at
not as
home?
much, no, because there is, as much as there's discrimination in dementia, there's discrimination in the industry, because there's a big stranglehold on, you know, the types of furniture you can get, and there's a big stranglehold and there's a lot of money in aged care. And so when I was researching and trying to make these interiors look like a home rather than a facility, the prices would double because they had aged care attached to it. Right. So I actually got normal furniture and I tweaked. And there's a few certain rules about seat height and arm height and things that you have, and the rest you can tweak. And we battled against slip ratings, we battled against colour ratings, and we battled against a lot of things because that was the norm and that's what it was meant to be.
Dementia Australia does have on its website booklets about how to design the colours, you know, type, signs, gardens, how to make a dementia-friendly garden.
Yeah.
So there is quite a lot of advice, but furniture is something else again.
Yeah, and it is because you're working with a lot of architectural companies to get the building before you can get to the next stage. So you're sort of battling them too. And then you're battling the system of how things have always been done. Everybody wants to learn and change, but it's just a case until you get it done. You know, there's suggestions, but as you were saying, that things are quite different everywhere you go.
Yeah.
This was also different in the fact that not everybody in the facility has dementia. So you're trying not to discriminate the people that don't have dementia as well. So there's a base rule of certain colours and a base rule of certain things, and then you start working about, you know, what are the issues within that home and that environment.
When we look at the impact of discrimination on people with dementia, I suppose, and Phil, to you first on this, one of the big things is anticipating discrimination. You stop doing things, you stop going to places, you stop socialising, you stop putting yourself in situations where you anticipate you'll face discrimination. Is that how you find it?
It is true. If I ring a taxi to go out that morning, sometimes I sit back and I get nervous and I'm going, is this going to be another taxi driver that refuses to take me? So I'm getting.
And does that happen a lot, just for those who aren't
aware? It's happened 4 times.
Wow. Well, they'll roll up and say sorry.
Well, I've walked to the front of a cab line and just hopped in the car, and he said, no, I'm not taking you, you've got a dog. And I said, well, it's an assistance dog, you have to take service dogs, it's law. He said, no, that's it. So I had to hop out of the car, and then I was so embarrassed that I had to walk down the taxi rank and then finally get a driver that was going to take me. So if I get out of bed in the morning, excuse the word, but I'm shitting myself when I'm about to organise something to happen, because I just end up in tears. I get all messed up and can't concentrate properly.
And
So how
sometimes
am I
it's
supposed-
easier just to say, I'm not going to bother.
Yeah, how am I supposed to perform if I'm going to a meeting after all that?
Yeah, Dad used to do that sometimes. You know, we'd have him all ready to go out, and then he'd just say, "I'm not going." And you could never really argue with him about why he wasn't going. I mean, he wouldn't have expressed himself as well as you did just then, Phil. But I've often thought it was just that Dad didn't really want to have to face a situation where he might have felt embarrassed.
I mean, I read some of the statistics from Dementia Australia on this. They are alarming about the number of, well, the extent of isolation and loneliness.
Yeah, well, people stop calling. I mean, it's really interesting. If you look at the surveys we've done, 39% of Australians say they feel awkward talking to somebody with dementia. 41% of them say that they find it confronting. And you think, really? How can you be like that? How can you think like that? It's just, you just talk to someone with dementia just like you talk to Phil. It doesn't make any difference how I talk to Phil at all.
Exactly.
He's still Phil.
And Shana, I think it was you touched on making the space comfortable for family members, which is not just the design of the room, but I mean, do we see, this is I guess a sensitive point, but extended family members even withdrawing and someone with dementia
Totally.
struggling to maintain that relationship?
Because you're also in a traditional environment, which what Mum was in, is that you're also surrounded about 30 people. You just get put into this main area and you go in and you can't have private conversations. Certain areas you can sort of walk away. But it was just like a big environment, and you're hearing other people and seeing their problems and how they've degraded as well, which is just so sad. But your children, you know, as well, trying to sort of see their grandma, but they're looking around everywhere going, is that going to be her? Is that going to be her? So they're discriminating, thinking that this is what they're going to see in the future. But it's not, it doesn't feel like a family environment, doesn't feel like a home. You feel like you're given 10 minutes to be there, even though you're not. You're sitting there waiting for something to happen. You're waiting for a conversation that won't naturally flow when, you know, depending what stage they are. So you don't feel like you can laugh. You don't feel like you can get caught up in how you would normally. And I think one of the biggest things that stops a lot of people going is that you feel like you can't laugh out loud because it's such a sad place to be and it's such a sad situation. And we lost our sense of humour. We lost our sense of humour to laugh at the things that would go wrong. And laughter is one of the biggest things to make you happy. And if you can't go in there as a child and feeling like you're allowed to laugh, you don't want to be there.
I think there needs to be more private spaces.
Yes.
In aged care facilities for people with dementia to talk with their families. You know, a little room here, a little room there, something like that. Because I watched one of my uncles who got diagnosed, and I went at a meal time to see what the food was like. And
how was it, by the way?
Not bad. But he was in a room with all sorts of people with dementia, some far more advanced than him. He was still able to read the newspaper, and I thought, this is not the right way to do it.
Yeah.
This, you know, you can't just put everybody with dementia in the same room as if they're a flock of animals and you're just going to pen them up together. It's totally and utterly wrong, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But is this where gardens could play such a part? You know, and this taking away dignity from a dementia resident by not allowing them to do anything is part of the problem.
Yeah.
And having a garden that the family can walk in, or having something that an experience that is actually happening, and it doesn't matter if someone is in the garden and is taking plants out and putting it in somewhere else. It's the doing rather than the passive sitting that I think is to be encouraged.
Well, I mean, one of the first we heard from in the earlier video clip, Tara, talking about her dad going to the men's shed and
sweeping
the floor, but then someone eventually said, "You're not really doing much here, mate." The impact that has.
Awful.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of people in life that do that now, so why does it mean with dementia? We've got somebody at work that's just going, really, they're not doing anything.
But what's lying behind that? Is this a lack of understanding, lack of knowledge?
It's ignorance again.
Yeah.
It's total ignorance. You know, it's so prevalent, dementia in Australia. We know that it impacts something like 7 out of 10 families. It's really hard. You know, I look at the surveys and I think, gosh, well, these 64% of Australians, I think, say they have no awareness of dementia. And you think, how is that possible? I really find it difficult to accept the figures.
And before we get to the solutions here, how we change that, what we do going forward from here, Phil, I just wanted to come back to the impact question here of this discrimination we're talking about and ask, I guess, a bit of a blunt question. What's worse? Is it the dementia or the discrimination?
I think it's probably a bit of both, to be honest. But discrimination even comes in families. I mean, that's, and friends. Some family members really can't deal with it, and so again, you're just left behind. I've lost a few friends since I was diagnosed with dementia, and I could never understand why.
But do you think they really understand that they can talk with you just like we're talking with you now? Or do you think they actually have this strange preconceived idea of what having a dementia diagnosis is all about?
I think it's preconceived ideas,
Yeah.
definitely, Ita, but I think some people are afraid of how to approach it, and
Yeah.
again, it's education. I invited them to jump onto the Dementia Australia website and read up on it when I was diagnosed, so they were more informed. But some others didn't, and they left, but that's not a big deal. I've still got all my best friends, so.
Yeah.
Good.
That's important. Before we get to tackling some of the solutions here, we've got one final piece of video to play. Let's just have a look at that.
I just hope that the general public get a better foundation of knowledge and people that they can refer to get knowledge about dementia, and they will find it much easier to understand. And do it earlier in the piece too. Get early intervention. Start out by going to courses like Dementia Australia have and learn about dementia. And you don't have to be a person with dementia or a carer, but just go along and get an understanding. And I guess that's why we have dementia-friendly communities, that the whole public arena is made aware and is not frightened by it all and doesn't fear that it's infectious or whatever.
I learned, sometimes the hard way, that it was not my job to make things how I thought they should be, but to let go and support her in the life she wanted to live.
When Mum was still alive, and sometimes I had to go away, I asked my dear friends to please go and see her and give her some company, because she would be missing me very much. And even though they actually spoke the same language or were similar culture, they begged me forgiveness, and they said, Daniela, we can't do that. We just can't be with her because we don't know how to behave, we don't know what to say. A person with dementia, that's just a total unknown world to us. So I think there we really, really have to help people get educated, get informed, become a dementia friend, and then be able to actually interact with people living with dementia, because it's not so difficult, and it's quite encouraging. Once you start, you will be enriched.
Yeah, and the thing that rings through from all of them there is get educated, get informed, and you know, Ida, this comes back to something you were saying earlier. What is discrimination? You put yourself in their position, but how do we do that?
Well, I think our messages have to be blunter. I've often thought that many of the health messages we deliver in Australia are not blunt. So if you think back to the Grim Reaper campaign when I was chairing the National Advisory Committee on AIDS, well, the doctors returned from Paris and they said we need a campaign that's going to shock Australians out of their apathy. So we gave them one. We shocked them out of their apathy. And we could see from all the research that the Department of Health did afterwards that Australians changed their behaviour. So we know that if the campaign is effective and really has a message, really packs a punch, you can make people
So,
change.
I mean, that is...
So I think our messages have to be blunter.
Yeah, well, I want to ask you about that. Many years on, that is still the Grim Reaper campaign,
Yeah.
you know, one of the most memorable campaigns in the health space that we know of. When you say we need to be blunt about this, what would you suggest?
Yes, well, I knew you'd ask me that, so I was thinking, I was thinking about it this morning, you know. Your neighbour has dementia. Did you say hello this morning? If you had dementia, would you still want a voice? If you had dementia, would you want someone to listen to what you were saying? I think it's all those sorts of things, but really, really hard, no gentle approach, a really tough voice, a really tough approach.
Something that's going to make people pay attention.
Yes.
I mean, what does everyone else think about how to change society attitudes here and better educate what is dementia?
Yes, but there's also the issue of ageism being so rampant in society, and that's a sort of a starting point for. And how do we get better examples of positive aging? And
I reckon you and I aren't doing too badly.
yes, we decided 77, 75, but. We have to education, and education really works. We, as a foundation, we sent 12 university students into an aged care home for a month to come up with design opportunities. They blew our mind with their empathy and the ideas that they came up with, and that filters down now to their families. So, all of these positive things have got to be done with the blunt messages. But, that dementia-friendly society, that's what we have to work on so strongly. And I've always thought that one of the things we could do is combat the issue by getting your Lions clubs, your Rotary clubs, all of the service clubs behind you, and as we did with Royal District Nursing Service right through Australia, in bowling clubs, etc., have the food that carers should be feeding themselves and those that they are looking after. But they're the people to get them understanding that we have to have a society that's so inclusive. So you've got to bring people in, not wait for them to come to you.
I totally agree, and I think you hit on exactly what the problem is, that we've changed as a community in the fact that we don't have an inclusive community in anything anymore. And I'm actually talking and working with urban planners, and I think we go right back to that, not just as basic design, but urban planners. There's a couple of designers working on walking communities. We tend to have to drive somewhere to go for a walk rather than being able to walk to things within our space. And also, I think one of the biggest design faults in all the new buildings, we call them McMansions and things like that, is having the door inside your garage so you never have to go outside. You drive in your car, you go in the garage and you go into your house. No one steps outside their garage to see anybody and wave to their neighbour. When my kids grew up and weren't playing on the street anymore, no one saw each other because our connection was the children. So there was about 5 or 6 years where we didn't actually even see our neighbours because we were very busy. And because everyone went through their garage into their house, so nobody actually saw anybody anymore. And, checking on your neighbour. The biggest thing that we can do as designers and urban planners and work in that lifestyle is to show people how they can become a community again. And it's really important that, especially, and it frightens me the amount of apartments that we are living in at the moment, where people get to hide. Everybody gets to hide.
I have to give a plug for the ABC here, so forgive me, but in nursing homes for 4-year-olds, which is really delightful.
Amazing.
Beautiful. There was a little girl who I thought summed it all up very well. The interviewer said to her, "Why do you think those older people look very, very lonely? Why do they look sad?" And she said, "Because they haven't got anyone to play with them."
Yes.
And it's that, isn't it? And I thought, a dear little girl, she summed it all up.
Yep. Yeah.
Out of the mouths.
And that's the thing, sorry, can I just butt in on one little bit there, is that we want people to stay in the home as long as they want. I'll be fighting tooth and nail to get me out of my house, just putting it out there. I design spaces, but I want to be in my home.
I reckon you probably got a pretty good home.
And you don't want to go into a room and have a couple of your knickknacks and make that your home. You want to be in your home as long as you can, because that's human, and that is what you've built your whole life to be, in your forever home. And if we can look at design aspects to keep you into your home, work on your cognitive skills every day, you become certain things that you can do that make you. When you strip people of who they are, their humanity and dignity goes. So if you can still do what you are as a human being, you can keep being relevant.
100%. Phil, I mean, Ita mentioned the need for a brutal campaign, if you were to write an ad campaign, or at least a couple of messages that you think need to get across to the public, what would they be?
I think probably the first one is never make an assumption. You could assume that I don't have dementia, or you could assume that I do, or how bad my dementia is. Making assumptions about me, I find a little disconcerting, because people often say that, gee, you're a lot better than I thought. Or I've had people say that, yeah, things aren't going too well, are they? So, yeah, I think, like Ida said, you have to be brutal in trying to get this information across to the general population.
Oh,
and I'm wondering if
with
there's
Phil, you'd simply say, I went to 4 doctors, or however many it was. I went to 3 doctors, and they all said I couldn't be their patient because I have dementia. You know, it's really that blunt.
Yep.
And I'm also wondering whether there's a cultural issue here as well in how we take care of our elderly
Definitely.
That's what Maggie said.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I want to ask you too, Phil, about someone who hasn't contributed a lot to this discussion, and that's Sarah. She looked like she wanted to get in on the act a few minutes ago. Just tell me, because I mean, when we're talking about solutions, obviously the idea of an assistance dog is not for everyone, but tell me the story of when did Sarah come along?
I got Sarah at 8 weeks, and she went into 2 years of training and finally passed her public access licence, which means she's allowed to go anywhere except for a court, a zoo or an operating theatre for reasonable reasons. But what she does for me is she finds things around the house, like my keys, my wallet, my phone, the TV remote. With dementia, if you're trying to get out of the house, don't even worry about the taxi driver. If you're trying to get out and you can't find your keys or your wallet, it's the same for everyone. You just go into Stress City. And if I can't find my keys, I can say, Sarah, keys, fetch. And that way I get out the door and do it on time.
So she has specific training for that very role?
Yeah, absolutely. And if I'm out and about and I get lost or I'm confused, Sarah comes in tight against me because she can tell, and she sits in tight until my memory comes back, or I'm not confused anymore, and, you know, off we go again. But she's done 50 flights with me with Virgin, and she sits in premium economy and lies on the floor. And I don't have to pay for her, but the funniest thing is she gets points.
I love it.
It must be an anomaly in the system somewhere, but I'm not sure how to drag them over to mine yet.
Actually, just laughing like that reminds me, in Sydney, until recently, there was the Arts Health Institute.
Yeah.
And they lost their government funding. And what they did was go into homes with laughter, with between jobs actors, and they stimulated all the residents, and they sang with them, and they also had role playing about how someone living with dementia would feel within a home, and how a carer could look after them. Really important things. And they lost government funding. So we should be looking for all these good initiatives, like more of blunt messages from Dementia Australia and others, and food. And the importance of that, put them all together.
I was going to ask, whose responsibility is this educating when we talk about, you know, the campaign here, whether it's a TV campaign, whether it is structural change in organisations like the AMA, and we've talked a bit about the discrimination at the GP level and so on. Where does the responsibility lie here, Ita? Perhaps starting from the government down.
Well, we do need, and we don't have, a fully funded national dementia plan in Australia. So I think that's where we should start. We need a fully funded. We have a framework, but it's not fully funded. We need a fully funded national dementia plan. Many other countries in the world do have this now. We don't have one.
And what does that mean? What is a dementia plan?
How are we going to handle all the people with dementia? You know, the caseload is 250 new cases every day. You heard the figures. More than 447,000 people are living with dementia. And it's going to continue to increase.
And that gives what guidelines to doctors? It gives...
You've got pressures on aged care facilities, you've got pressure on hospitals, you've got pressure on doctors, you've got pressure on people with dementia, you've got pressure on the community. There's so many issues that we have to look at. We need a plan. It's not going away. Dementia is not going away. It's the chronic disease of the 21st century, and we need a plan that's right for the 21st century. So, first of all, Marie and the team are going to have to be knocking on the door of the government and say, hey, we need some more funding and we need a plan. We need a national plan to look at how we're going to handle what lies ahead of us unless we find a cure or we have a medical breakthrough or we find a treatment that will slow it down. So that's where I'd start. And of course, Dementia Australia will continue to advocate as it always does. And it will probably think about some of the ways it might make the message blunter based on the conversations that we've had here today. And that's what this is all about, to learn more and get people to do that survey, because we need to know how people in the community feel.
Statistics do matter, Maggie.
But we need community engagement in all ways, and one of the things is I bring everything back to food, I know, but how many of us in the community understand the difference in the needs of any ageing person, not only those living with dementia? That should be really well known, and so should it be that we can protect our brains from dementia as we live. We can't in protecting, it's helping, it's not taking it away, but otherwise we have this tsunami.
Well, do you think that home economics should be put back into the school curriculum? I went to home science high school, which don't exist anymore. When women became equal, they deleted cookery. They deleted home domestic science out of school. They should have kept it in girls' school and put it into boys' school, because we did learn about nutrition.
Absolutely. Well, that's why we have, say, Stephanie Alexander Kitchen Garden Foundation. We need that for everyone, whereas children at primary school learn to grow and cook, and it empowers them for life. But we need it right through society, that understanding what the difference it can make.
I totally agree.
Yeah.
And I think, sense of community is everything, and it's just something you see so relevant in the world today. We've got an angry society. Everybody's in a hurry, and what you're talking about, people discriminating. I remember when my mum was first diagnosed, and I was at the supermarket, and I was just caught up in my own well of sadness, and this lady in front of me couldn't find her purse, and she was all fuddly and whatever, and I'm just sort of staring off into space, and the man just in front of me, behind her, just gave over his wallet, and he just said, "Don't worry, love, I've got this one." And she burst into tears, and she's just going, "I'm so sorry." And he goes, "Don't be sorry. Someone will do it for me one day. It's okay." And I just stood there and I cried and I said, "I hope someone," I'm going to get emotional, "I hope someone does that for my
That's
mum."
what we mean by a dementia-friendly society.
Exactly.
That's exactly what we're asking people to do. Take a moment out and say, could it be dementia? Can we help you?
Absolutely, and I think that's the thing, is that we're too impatient anymore, and as a society we've got to relearn a few things. And I think getting back to community, and I think getting back to urban planners, and also with the government, I think there needs a big shake-up in how we build environments now, because we are so busy and caught up with making money on our asset, and we don't want to lose money and profit and loss. We have forgotten how to live as a community and be together. And it is a responsibility of the government, it's a responsibility of urban planners, and it's a responsibility of architects and interior designers to help get that sense of community back.
And Phil, perhaps to wrap this up, give us a sense what a day in your life would look like without some of the discrimination that we've been discussing today.
Positive, number one. Very positive. I'm really active and I do a lot of advocacy. So I get up in the mornings and I look forward to the day. I feel like I'm working again. I've been retired for 5 years, but it's amazing just keeping the mind active, increasing my organisational skills. I diarise every single little thing I have to do during the day, and it comes up with the reminders, and I can highlight it in yellow that I've done it, and that way I don't forget things. So it really, you don't have a hard time until someone comes up and discriminates you. Without that, I don't think I'd have too many issues, to be honest with you.
And you have purpose.
Yes,
Yeah.
Absolutely. And having a purpose is absolutely priority.
Yeah.
Well, Phil, thank you in particular for being so generous with your experiences and descriptions of what you face. Would you please thank all of our panel, Ita, Maggie, Shana and Phil.
Phil, it was wonderful.
No, a terrific discussion. Stay where you are. I think Marie's going to come back up.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, a big thank you to David, to Ita, to Shana, Maggie, to Phil for sharing your personal experiences, for raising a light and shedding light on discrimination. And to our video voices, thank you. The people that participated in this were so incredibly generous, sharing their stories, and I'm sorry for the glitches that we had, but what was important was the stories that people shared. And it's an honour to have the opportunity to hear those today, to share those stories, and to have such an extraordinary panel. And we have a small gift for you in appreciation. Thank you so much. And Margaret is going to bring that up. Thank you very much, Margaret. The second part of our session here, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to introduce Bubba. And Bubba is a powerful film that shows the impact of Alzheimer's disease on a family. Bubba is a story of how a day of traumatic events leads a family dealing with dementia to make a very tough decision. Bubba looks at many of the issues that arise when dealing with dementia, including care options, tensions within the family, financial burden, changing roles in families, grief, stress, and also the positive effects. Bubba was directed by John Fink, and we're delighted to have John with us today. And John will join us at the front shortly, and he'll be here to ask you to answer any questions that you may have afterwards. It now gives me great pleasure to introduce John Fink, the director of Bubba. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome John. John's ABC documentary Big Dreamers in 2006 was screened at many festivals around the world. Aside from being a filmmaker, writer and musician, John is also creative director of the Fink Group, who runs some of Sydney's most celebrated restaurants, including Bennelong here at Sydney Opera House. So ladies and gentlemen, we're going to be joined by Lynn Chick, and Lynn was a co-writer on this program. So Lynn, are you around? Where are you? I saw you before. Just outside. Okay, great. So what we're going to do is we are now going to show Bubba, and John and Lynn will be here afterwards to answer any questions. So if we could play the film, thank you.
Bubba? Bubba, honey, where are you? Bubba? Bubba? You in here? Bubba?
Up we get, Bubba. Oh, you're hurting me. Why are you so rough?
Sorry. Almost there.
I don't like it here. I want my money.
You don't have any money.
I want my money.
You're on the aged care pension, which means you don't have any money. And I'm on the carer's pension, which means neither do I.
You've been stealing from me. I'm going to leave. I'm going to hitchhike up north.
I'll tell you what. If you can find the front door, you can go. But you can't go anywhere with your hair looking like that. Come on, over to the salon.
I don't mean to be bad. I love you.
I love you too, Mum. Hmm? It's not about being good or bad.
Please don't put me in a home.
Don't worry about that, okay? Okay?
Okay. I wish my dad was here.
Morning, Mum. You've been sewing again, huh?
I got the curtains finished.
Bubba, there is no order. You sold the machine.
Ah, that Mansour's order. I hate alterations.
Well, don't let that get cold.
They told me it was a rush job and they'd pick them up sometime today. Will you ring them?
Why don't we have breakfast and then we can talk about it later, okay?
So, will you?
Will I what?
Ring Mansour's. Find out what time they're coming.
You know what? I will. As soon as I'm finished here, I'll give them a call. How about that?
Sis, come on, pick up. I know you're there. It's time, Pam. We need to sign the admission form by tomorrow to get Mum into the home. I'm coming over after work so we can both sign it tonight.
Hello? Hello?
Yeah?
Where are you?
I'm here. I'm in the office.
Oh, I want the telly. Oh, oh, there you are. There's my girl. Oh, good girl. Yes, your mummy's good girl. Where have you been?
Telly's on, Mum.
I know.
Okay. Leave it, Bubba. It'll go to voicemail. Hello?
Bubba, is that you?
Who is it?
What? No, it's Steve, your son.
It's the wrong end.
Are you ringing about the curtains?
Are you on speakerphone? I can hardly hear you.
He just left it.
Excuse me, I'm talking to... What's your name?
Will you let me have it?
Sis, that you?
Yeah, Steve, hang on. So you need to talk into this end.
Have you signed the contract?
Listen, I want to know. I don't want her gone, okay? I just need a break, okay? Just a few days max.
Mum needs full-time care, Pam. She's too much for the both of us now.
Will you let it go?
I'm not doing anything.
Come on, no, come on. We've been through this.
Oh, you're so stubborn.
I'm not being stubborn.
Is it about the curtains?
Oh.
Sign the paperwork. You can do whatever you want.
Steve, you said 8 to 9 months.
8 to 9 months?
And
That's
that is
ridiculous.
too soon.
Look, there's an opening now. We need to take this opportunity.
Mum, if you don't let go, I will put you in a home.
Stop it!
What's going on? Well, that's it. I'm coming over.
Bubba? Bubba? Bubba! Bubba!
Oh, my... Mum! Mum!
I'm sorry, Mum. Come on. Let's sit you down. Here we are. Here we go.
Easy, easy, easy. Yeah,
You all right?
that's better.
Hey.
When were you going to tell me she was running off? I'm calling an ambulance. Pam, what are you doing? You're 12 years old?
Come on, it's
She needs to
just
go
a
to
scratch.
hospital. She can have concussion.
I'll take her to the doctors tomorrow, okay?
Stop squabbling. I'm hungry. I do love honey prawns.
Mum.
Oh, it hurts, Pammy.
Pam.
I just don't want her to go.
Neither do I.
It's gonna be okay, Mum. It's gonna be okay.
Ladies and gentlemen, I am delighted to welcome on stage John Fink, who is the director of Bubba, Lynn Chick, the writer, and Marcus, the producer. What an extraordinary and an incredibly powerful film. Ladies and gentlemen, please acknowledge John, Lynn and Marcus.
Very nice. Very good. Thank you.
John, I'm going to open the floor to questions in a moment. Before I do, I'd just like to ask, what was the inspiration for that film?
Lynn's mother.
Right.
So Lynn had written a script, living with her mother, and that's where it all started. For me, it was ageing population. Dementia is definitely something that's on the radar, needs attention. I have a very distant relative that is in a home, but I related to Lynn's story quite powerfully. The film itself is a tool for community engagement, and it's a door opener. So however that happens, if it's in a church hall or if it's on the Googles, on the internet with social media, like the kids of today, then that's the way it should be, yeah.
Was an incredibly poignant, sensitive and so beautifully done, and it touched us to the core, and it certainly, for those of us that have family members, loved ones or who are living with dementia, it's extraordinary. Ladies and gentlemen, please acknowledge John and Marcus and Lynn again, and I'm now going to open up to the floor. Please give them a round of applause. That is amazing. Now, I believe we have a roving mic. I would like to open up to any questions that you might have about the film, about Bubba. Yeah, please, Shana. So just up the front, sir. Shana, if you could stand up, that's great. That's helpful in the man with the mic finding you. Thank you.
Congratulations. Congratulations, that was absolutely amazing. And Lynn, I can see how emotional you are at the moment, and I did everything not to cry the whole time. It was absolutely amazing, and to pour your raw heart onto your screenplay and see these two men bring it to life is just incredible. How do you feel now that it's out here? What do you want out of this? Because you don't just do this to tell your own story, you want to tell your mum's story. What do you want to come out of this?
I've got to say, I was standing back there and listening to the dialogue again, and I was crying because a lot of the dialogue was stuff that Mum had said, and being a writer, I kept a diary during that time. But it's also Marcus's aunt had dementia and she was a wanderer, and sometimes I just think some stories are worth telling and sharing, and not everyone realises what it's like, to be a carer. I thought, look, how hard can it be? I've got this covered. And look, it took 6 months, and I was going, I'm going to kill her. You want to be patient and stuff like that. And so I just thought it's interesting. It's an interesting story. I think people would be interested in seeing what it's like. And so we incorporated some of Marcus's aunt's wandering dementia and stuff like that. So it was a bit of a collaboration, and it was so generous of John because he funded it and did it and made it off his own money, and it was like, whoa, thank you.
And can I just say, just to add one thing, is that what we saw in Bubba is you saw that she had a life before dementia by showing that she was a seamstress and wanting to get the things, and the thinking about the curtains on the phone was hilarious. But I just think that's the thing we do forget, is that they had a life before dementia, and it's really important to keep that alive, so congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Could I ask you a question? We've been talking about discrimination this morning. Your aunt, your mother, were there any cases of instances of discrimination that you could share with us?
Oh, hi. Yeah, that's a great question. Just straight up, I had that incredible sort of thing that I think a lot of people here have faced, where our family found it very confronting, particularly my mother, that her sister, my aunt, who was a journalist and a very successful writer, suddenly kind of wasn't there. And I know this sounds terrible, but in a strange way, we had to face our own prejudices and our own discrimination towards a family member, and that was very confronting. in and of itself. And one of the things that helped us break through that was my uncle saying, just come and take her for a walk. And spending time with her and going, okay, she's not the same person, she's not all here. And that was obviously hard because she was an intellectual and a great conversationalist, but you went for a walk and she could walk. And 10 kilometres later, you were like, yeah, this is my Aunt Elwyn. And so I think that was something I found quite interesting just when I was listening before about the issue of discrimination. I think it's something that possibly exists within our society, but also potentially within our own families when we have to deal with this.
So overcoming our own prejudices.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What about your mum?
In my family, it's a long line. It's my cousin's husband's mother. We're Jewish, you know, everybody. So, I went and visited her a number of times. I knew her when she was a concert pianist and a filmmaker and a very active, socially active person. I saw her, and at first I thought, has she been drinking or something? Because it was progressive. And I didn't know how to respond or how to react, so I'd just walk into another room. You know, once a year we'd have Passover, and the whole extended Jewish family, we'd come in and we'd have dinner and we'd all shout at each other and no one would listen. That's what Jewish people do. Yeah. How are you doing today? You know, well, I'm not, you know, anyway. So, but she would be in another room and I didn't know how to deal with it, to be honest. It took me a couple of years before I worked out what to do because I felt uncomfortable because she would be there blathering on, and eventually her husband, who's stuck by her and still is, Bert would just say, come and sit down, John, come and sit down. So I come and sit down and she's there playing the piano like this. You know. She's actually doing this on nothing, just on a tabletop or just like this. She's got the muscle memory of it all. And after a while I just worked out you just have to sit with her and let her be. And at one stage, it's funny watching her, at one stage she said, I know you. And then she was off, so she kind of got me there for a bit, it was off. So yes, for me, when you're on that subject of discrimination, it's the fear of the unknown of how to respond for me. I didn't know how to respond. I thought, oh my God, this is a person I've had normal conversation with as I was growing up, practically, from my 20s onwards. So 30 years of knowing this woman and that change coming is it's very challenging. Like Marcus said, when it's your own family, there's all of those polite structures around extended family that you don't want to cross. And it's different to somebody just in the street, I guess. There's someone up the back there, I think.
We've got time for one more question. Trevor, please. Trevor, could you stand up just so that we can get the mic to you? Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much for the film. Quite moving. I'm a person who lives with dementia and just sitting there wiping the tears off my face.
Oh, darling.
And but surely that was the intention. Look, fantastic. It poses another question. Stay or go? Okay. Would someone or all of you like to comment on that?
Because I know I promised my mother I wouldn't put her in a nursing home. You know, and you make that promise really believing that you can not do it. And then luckily there was support. I had people coming around and she'd fall out of bed every morning. There were other complications with her moving around. And so every morning I'd lay there and I'd hear the cane knocking on the swing doors in her room going, oh, what the shit, you know. And she'd be naked and she would have laid there for hours. And one of the people coming in said, Lynn, it's time. And it was a relief because I can't do it. I promised. And why can't I do this? So, yeah, sometimes it's nice for someone else to tell you gotta, because you just don't, You know, and she knew too, once she was out that door, mate, she's not coming back. Well, you know, they know, and it was like, please, and I'm going, honey, you're naked, you're on the floor, you're cold, I can't do this to you anymore, you know. So, yeah, it's an awful question to answer.
And that's the question, obviously, of the film, and the idea of the film is to ask that question, is to present that yin and yang of the sister who's given up her career to look after her mother, and the brother who's still working and just pops in once on Sunday to visit. And it's sort of that conversation is being had so many times in Australia, around the world, but in Australia. So the three of our purpose in making this film was to ask that question, you know.
Well, I think, yeah, absolutely, and it goes to the idea there is it's obviously there's an internal world within the story that's, you know, Lynn's written, but the idea too is hopefully that the film poses that larger question of for people of, you know, how do you manage this if you're mid-career, but importantly, how does our society manage that? If there's an expectation that people are going to keep working, and now there's an expectation we keep working into our 60s and 70s, well, it's kind of unreasonable then to say, oh, and at the same time you have to be committing full-time care. And so how will our society respond? And I think it's really interesting what came up before, that there isn't a single entity or a single organisation that is managing this issue. And so it'd be great to think that this film helps contribute to that conversation about, well, maybe we really do need a single, maybe we need a minister for this specific issue.
Yeah.
Marcus, Lynn, John, thank you so much. That was an extraordinarily powerful film, and thank you for your generosity in sharing your experience. And John, our thanks to you particularly from Dementia Australia for your generosity in supporting Dementia Australia and also this event. Ladies and gentlemen, please thank John, Lynn and Marcus.
Thank you.
I would now like to introduce Jay Dave to say a thank you on behalf of Dementia Australia advocates. Jay is an experienced materials engineer and project manager who lives in Sydney with her family. Jay is a keen member of the Dementia Advocates Program and a member of the Steering Committee for the Dementia Friendly Communities Project. Currently, Jay works as a stylist for a property staging company. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Jay to the stage. Thank you.
Hello everyone. Welcome and thank you so much for coming today. Isn't this event so far truly epic? All the stories are so straight from the heart and the experience is so broad out here for what everybody has already been through. This is truly epic for me. I still can't believe that I'm standing here in our iconic Sydney Opera House. And isn't the launch today just truly majestic? It is such an honour to be here on behalf of all the Australians impacted by dementia. The theme this week, Dementia Doesn't Discriminate, Do You?, is very powerful. I believe everyone whose lives have been affected by dementia experience some form of isolation and social exclusion, and there are statistics to back this up. Sadly, this is at a time in their lives where they need support and social engagement more than ever. I say this from personal experience and would like to share my family's story with you. Growing up, I have the fondest memories of my dad. He was just the coolest, smartest, kindest guy you would ever meet. And we did so many things together. We fixed cars, we built stuff in our garage, we grew vegetables in our garden, and we brewed beer together, much to my mother's dismay. My family are very ordinary, or extraordinary, depending on how you look at it. Mum and Dad happily married for 34 years. Mum's in finance, Dad's an electrical engineer. My younger brother is an environmental scientist and I am a materials engineer. In our house, everything worked like clockwork and we overcame every challenge together. We all care about each other and argue the normal amount between each other, but I guess that's probably everyone's house, right? Slowly, and without anyone noticing, things began to change ever so subtly. My mum would often call me and explain that Dad was constantly forgetting social engagements that they had agreed to attend together, such as parties and weddings, leading to arguments. In addition to this, at functions, my dad would often approach family members and ask to be assisted in remembering the names of other guests who he had known for years. I felt like I knew my dad was fine. I wrote it off as depression and told everyone to just relax and be supportive, and I'm sure everything will be all right. That was until one day when everything changed. Fast forward, after spending an entire day doing countless grueling tests on Dad, we are finally in the waiting room awaiting a doctor to give us the results. I cannot describe the feeling that overwhelms you when you hear the words, "Your father is terminally ill." He had younger onset dementia. As my family and I started wading through the instant grief, many thoughts crossed my mind. This was a high-functioning man we all looked up to. He was my hero, my best friend, the most pure and caring person that you would ever meet. And he was still a young man. What about him and his travel plans, his retirement and his dreams? There are so many questions in that moment and so much uncertainty. Dementia doesn't discriminate. It affects people from all ages and any background. And my dad was 58 when we got that diagnosis. Something that helped me understand at the time was the phrase, "casually appears normal," but upon further investigation, it is clear that there is something wrong. This summed up our situation perfectly. I could not let my dad and my family go through this alone. I chose to be there with my dad, and from that moment on, left my engineering career to do so. Imagine going from someone's daughter to being someone's carer overnight. What followed for me, personally, was the feeling of constantly being on the back foot, not knowing what was going to change one day to the next. Being a carer is certainly a fulfilling, heartwarming, noble thing. However, it is profoundly underestimated how much burden lies with a carer. It is a very isolating and demanding role. The day-to-day frustration for my family around agony, around hoarding, showering, eating, medicines, going places, doing shopping, and so on, all the day-to-day things, could get quite tricky as Dad's confusion and fatigue worsened. In my usual style, I tried to approach each task with logic, which, well, had hit and miss results. Something frustrating for us was when people would come and visit, they would act like he was totally crazy and unfit to be part of his own favourite activities, such as socialising or having a beer, and treated him like someone who was not even able to hold a conversation and alienated him. Dementia is not a disease like any other. Even if we can't help someone physically, we should still engage them and talk to them with love and respect. You start with someone you know and watch them change so much. Dementia is this terminal disease that robs you slowly of the person standing in front of you, and it changes their life and your life together. There is still a person there that wants to be included and treated with kindness, patience, and affection. And it is unacceptable that people in our community already dealing with such difficult circumstances face discrimination in our inclusive modern society. This is just the tip of the iceberg of the various issues that the people affected by dementia face on a day-to-day basis. And I would like everyone to understand that it can be isolating for all involved, not just the person living with dementia, but their carer and their whole family as well. All I can say now is no matter how difficult it was, I am forever grateful for the time that I got to spend with my dad. I would really like to thank, from the bottom of my heart, Dementia Australia for their ongoing help throughout this incredibly trying time for my family. And for me personally, they have introduced me to invaluable lifelong friends that have made some of the difficult moments much easier and bearable. Now, as a dementia advocate, I feel that it is so important for all of us to share whatever skills and experiences we have to make important changes and quantum leaps forward in the support we provide for people living with dementia, their carers, and families. And this is in the context of the 447,000 people currently living with dementia of some sort, and the 1.5 million people that are out there caring. Everyone going through this circumstance needs more support, companionship, and compassion. I would really like to thank everyone here today for making this wonderful event happen. Thanks everyone watching on live stream all around Australia. And from the bottom of my heart, thank each and every one of you for being here today and sharing my story with me.
Jay, you used a word before and I think it describes that perfectly. That was epic. Please, another round of applause for Jay. Ladies and gentlemen, we're coming to the end of our event now, and I hope the powerful discussions that we've had here today leave you feeling inspired to change how we respond and behave around people living with dementia. Too many Australians do not know where to turn, and this must change. We need everyone, from family and from friends, work colleagues, to government and researchers, to think and behave differently and bring about a societal shift in thinking about dementia. At Dementia Australia, we are committed to providing support for people living with dementia and communities across Australia. We're committed to reducing discrimination and this will be continued to be a key focus area over the coming years. My thanks for joining us here today at this significant event, for providing support to those living with dementia, their families and carers, and for helping to raise much needed dementia awareness. One last mention is to encourage you all to watch a wonderfully uplifting and encouraging documentary called Storm in a Teacup, which airs tomorrow night at 9:30 p.m. on ABC. Storm in a Teacup is an intimate portrayal of Western Australian artist Leon Pericles as he juggles his role as artist, husband, and carer to his wife Moira, who has Alzheimer's disease. The film is told through the eyes of their daughter Nia, who joins us here today. Dementia Australia is a proud supporter of this documentary, and Nia, thank you so much for being here today. After we close, ladies and gentlemen, we have media, and we would appreciate your support in moving quickly from the room so that we can record the interviews that media are about to launch. Ladies and gentlemen, this conversation is so important, and I urge you to talk to your community about discrimination and dementia, to complete the survey if you've not already done so. Together, we can create a more inclusive Australia for all people of all ages living with all forms of dementia, their families and their carers. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. I really honour and appreciate your presence today.